Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. You're still watching NTV Weekend Edition. Now, early this week, the President signed into law the Competition Act of 2023, which aims at improving regulation in the business sector, including vertical and horizontal agreements, as well as mergers and acquisitions. Now, John Walugembe, Executive Director of the Federation of Small and Medium-Scale Enterprises, has been looking at the new legislation and looks at what it means to the business sector. Good evening, John, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mildred. It's always a pleasure to join you here on the Talk of the Nation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning.
Yes.
What was the state of the affairs in the business sector without this law?
Okay, so what we tell people is that in a free market economy, government must play the role of an umpire to ensure that all the players are following the rules. Now, what we heard is that government did not have a legal framework to guide competition. Of course, it had some policies. It had the trade policy of 2007. It had the consumer protection act policy of that were developed later on. But these lacked the force of law. They were just policies. They were just guidelines. This is the first time that this country is not coming up with a comprehensive regulation to control market players in the economy. And it's a good thing because Uganda was part of only a few countries like Burundi, South Sudan, and so on that do not have a comprehensive competition regulation.
Okay.
So the fact that Parliament passed this on 1st September 2023 and the President ascended to it on the 2nd of February 2024 is a good thing, and we need to congratulate government and all the actors who have been pushing for this.
Okay.
Just to mention, this act regulates 4 critical behaviors. It controls what we call horizontal arrangements. These are firms that are on the same level. We want to ensure that they play by the rules within that relationship. Maybe they are all SMEs. How do they relate with each other? How do we ensure that every firm sets the right prices at that level? Then we also have what we call vertical relationships that deal with issues of supply and distribution and things like that, resale price mechanisms, geographical limitations, and so on. These are people at different places on the value chain. So you may have a big enterprise and then you have small enterprises along the chain. How do they relate with each other? Then it also talks about the misuse of market power by monopolies. Certain companies have grown so big that they start misusing that power. Someone needs to bring them into check, and this law seeks to ensure that those guys still play by the rules. However big you are, you need to play by the rules. Then we also need to ensure that we control mergers and acquisition. Yes, you may be 2 small companies, but what if you merge? What if we have one big telecom company now in Uganda that decides what they'll charge for airtime, what they'll charge for this? So this law says no. As you're merging, we want to ensure that there's fair play in the market and you don't create unfair competition for other actors in the market.
So in that regard, what would you highlight as some of the positives to pick from the new law?
No, the positives are that government has taken a step in the right direction by enacting this law and consolidating all these policies and regulations that they've had in place for the first time. And the fact that they've highlighted what it is that they're going to regulate. You know, we've had issues around pricing. We've had concerns around cartels. For instance, in the pricing of petroleum, some of us are not convinced that there's no cartelish behavior there. You know, so it means that tomorrow I can complain and say, I suspect the global price of crude oil is coming down, our price is not coming. Then they'll ask me for the facts. If I present them, then they institute an inquiry. So it gives us as consumers a recourse. We can complain. Yes, we might win, the enterprise must win, but we must have independent arbiters who look into these issues.
Okay.
Yes.
And so talk to us about what the law defines as unfair competition, and are there penalties for each of these? No,
so the law has defined, as I said, within these regulated behaviors, what is unacceptable and what is unacceptable. And what the law has done is to set up what they call a technical committee. This is a departure from other international entities that have set up a standard statutory body that regulates this kind of uncompetitive behavior. For us, we have just set up a technical committee. You complain, you present the facts, then they institute an inquiry to see whether it warrants a full investigation. So this is the mechanism that government has put in place, which departs from global practice. So within
is the technical committee alone enough? Because there have been you know, disagreements on this, that for the law to be able to work, it should be having a body of an independent body of its own.
Yes, you know, for Uganda, we are in the process of this rationalization of government agencies. So government is looking at it from the financial standpoint. They don't want to create another institution.
But in Kakos.
Yes, but this committee is a very loose structure that is not going to help us, in my view. We need, at the very least, we should have gotten an existing agency and given them this mandate to ensure that they enforce compliance with the Competition Act. So we are not, as actors, therefore, we are not satisfied with this constitution of a technical committee within the Ministry of Trade. We believe it will not have teeth. You see, I mean, even when you look at the mechanisms that they'll use to punish wrong behavior, cessation orders, rectification or modification orders, a fine not exceeding 10% of the average turnover for the last 3 years. So you see that a firm can say, okay, it's okay, so we can pay this.
What then should have been the case when it comes to the penalties?
No, we should have set penalties that are deterrent, so that before someone engages in uncompetitive behavior, they think twice. But you see, what has happened? Instead of charging 10%, you could charge 40%, for instance, so that someone thinks twice before engaging in certain behavior. But this is not punitive enough in our view, and the committee can be compromised, because at the moment, we don't even know who will constitute the committee. The other issue is that the law itself lacks detailed regulations, because the Ministry of Trade should develop detailed regulations of how these things are supposed to operate. Because you see, the committee might even be full of the very people who are trying to make sure that are controlled by this act. So that's what I'm saying. It's a step in the right direction, but more work needs to be done.
Okay, so this law clearly does cut across, and also regionally. Let us look at this regional perspective.
Yes.
How does the law allow business entities to thrive in the East African community and also the COMESA economic blocks?
Yeah, so you know, at the East African level, we have a competition authority at the ESC level. We also have a competition framework at the COMESA level. So the moment this is aligned, because at what was happening now is that Ugandan businesses were falling prey to regulation by those entities because we lacked a framework. With this framework, what we have to ensure is that there's alignment and that Ugandans can be able to trade freely and engage in transactions freely across the region. The other issue is that this will position us better as a good investment destination, because these are things that investors look at to ensure that their interests are protected. One thing I need to mention on the downside is that there's a bit of overlap. There are the institutions that deal with uncompetitive behavior in certain sectors. For instance, in the communications sector, you have the Uganda Communications Commission. In the financial services sector, you have Bank of Uganda. In the electricity sector, you have the Electricity Regulatory Authority. So how do you ensure that you claw back this mandate into this technical committee, and how do they interface? So what we also don't want is to see a clash and overlap, and maybe the regulations will clarify on how some of these things will be addressed, because you have a lot of regulators, even in insurance. You have the Insurance Regulatory Authority, and it controls a certain level of uncompetitive behavior in that sector. So this committee, what mandate will it have in the insurance sector, for instance? So these are things we need to discuss further to ensure that there is no unnecessary, we don't have unnecessary friction.
Okay, so you did highlight that some of the issues that the law seeks to address is unhealthy competition, and so how is this helping in promoting the healthy competition in the business sector? No,
so for instance, we are saying that you cannot misuse your market power as a business, however big you grow. So if, for instance, I would use the telecoms, for instance, you cannot start setting prices that disadvantage others in the value chain, so other competitors. It means whatever you do, you must ensure that it does not disadvantage others. If you look at the setting of prices, we don't want people to sit in a room maybe petroleum actors. They sit somewhere in a nice hotel and they decide we shall all charge this much. So you go to Shell, they're charging this much. You go to Total, they're charging the same. You go to the other, they're charging the same. You're saying no. We must not allow such cartelish behavior, which some of us are concerned may have happened in the past. So with this law, let's assume the committee works and the law works as intended. It means that actors will think twice before engaging in such uncompetitive behavior. There's also been this issue of how do you have the same person, you're a manufacturer, you're a distributor, you're a retailer, you're doing everything across the value chain. It's not about capacity, it's about making sure that you don't lock out others. You don't look out others. That's why you see, look, in the EU, for instance, you've seen Google being fined by the EU. You've seen Facebook being fined. You've seen different companies being fined because the EU is very strong on anti-competitive behavior. And what we are saying here is that we must ensure that the big actors, especially the big actors, do not disadvantage the small business owners using their market power. Yes, and we hope that this committee, we have our doubts, but we hope that this committee will do its job. Yes.
Okay, now standing in the position of the Federation for Small and Medium Scale Enterprises, do you see yourself as a regulator or referee as far as this sector is concerned?
For us, we are not a referee, we are a beneficiary. We are a beneficiary. We are saying that for us, we are small people. We are most likely not to abuse our power because we are too small anyway. But let you control the big guys. You control the big guys. You cannot have a big farm taking charge of the entire value chain and kicking out small actors. You cannot have big farms sitting somewhere, duopolies or monopolies sitting somewhere in the corner and determining prices that disadvantage the consumer. So this is good for small businesses. This is good for consumers out there because they have a place they can go and whistleblow. Yes.
Okay. All right, then what would be your closing remarks in regards to the Competition Act? What is in for the business sector?
My closing remarks is an appeal. You know, we have many laws that sit on these books. You have the Nguli Act. You have all these acts that are completely useless and redundant because they are not being implemented. We hope that this act actually will be implemented and the Ministry of Trade, because there's a common excuse, you don't have budget. So they'll say the act is there, but there's no budget for the committee. We are saying let this thing work because it will help our economy to grow. At the end of the day, if you have fair competition, if small actors feel protected, if investors feel that if I come into Uganda, there will be fair play, it's good for everyone.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John Walugembe, the Executive Director of the Federation of Small and Medium Scale Enterprises, getting to highlight what is in for the business sector in regards to the new Competition Act of 2023.